the Cavs have been an interesting team this year. They're playing one of their most important games of the season now. I will preference this. Me and Av have not seen the Cavs play against the Atlanta Hawks either the games. It's being recorded right before Thanksgiving for obvious reasons, right? But we wanted to bring you something to preview this Boston Celtics Cavs game. So this is going to be interesting for the Cavs because it's one thing if you lose closely in Boston, right? Like out on the road, people kind of like expect that they had a hot shooting night. Do you think there's more or less pressure on this team in this game than there was in the first meeting?
I feel like it's a different kind of pressure because the pressure in that first matchup, I would say, was more based on their streak that they had going, and it was like, can they
Yes.
keep it going? This one will be, I feel like, a different level of pressure or a different type of pressure because it'll be like, okay, are the Celtics going to be, maybe potentially, we haven't seen the Hawks games yet, the only two losses on the Cavs season, and is that going to kind of start a narrative for the Cavs of like, hey, yeah, they're doing great, but they still can't beat that
Mm,
juggernaut in the East. So I feel like it's a different type of pressure. I also think, last game they got some benefit of the doubt, one, because they were tired from, that streak that they had going and how hard it was to keep that up. And two, Boston was shooting out of their minds in that game, especially from three. Like it was another level that, I don't think you're going to see every single game. So you almost gave them an excuse. Like, yeah, when Boston's shooting like that and the Cavs weren't shooting their best, it's probably going to come out like that. And they still only lost by 3. So if the teams play a more, I guess, even game in terms of like, okay, Boston gets more to the average on that shooting and the Cavs maybe shoot a little better, I think it'll be interesting to see how they can play when it's not so extreme in that way.
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to is like, okay, I don't expect Boston to be at 70% from three in the
Yeah.
third quarter of this game. So, like, what does that game look like? Hopefully, the Cavs can have, maybe Karis LeVert healthy, but definitely Isaac Okoro healthy. Like, we saw with him back into the lineup, how much of a difference that can make sometimes with his defensive presence, especially against somebody like Jason Tatum, who, like, to be
Mhm.
fair to Jason Tatum, it's not like Isaac Okoro has this long history of just clamping him up, right?
Yeah.
Like it's been a
He's
struggle.
not
He's
the
a really
Tatum
good player.
stopper.
Yeah, he's not
Yeah.
he's not Tatum glue, right? Like he's not Tatum retardant or anything like that, right? Where he's like Tatum proof. But it's still a better body to throw at him than like just like constantly having to rotate Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland at the problem, or maybe even like panic throwing Ty Jerome into that, right? Like, I think that's going to
Mhm.
be something that's interesting. I also think that they figured out something against the Celtics, that they really do have a problem with their bigs helping in the corners, right? Like, they
Mhm.
want to play these two big lineups, but Jarrett Allen specifically is just so used to having to help and crashing to the paint. And it's such a
Yeah.
big part of what he does that it does make it difficult to have him out there with Evan Mobley when you're playing somebody like this who has Al Horford that can shoot from the 4 or 5 spot. But also, like,
Yeah.
it's not like you could put George Niang on him, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think the answer is, hey, we just got to be a little bit more disciplined on some of this stuff. So it's not happening to us on the back end in these corners here. What do you think is the main adjustment from game one to game two that the Cavs are going to make against Boston?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hinted at it, but I do feel like the bigs has always been the problem when matching up these two teams. Like obviously they have incredible shooters, and even throughout their bench, they have incredible shooters as well. And we could sometimes match that, but I think we struggle to find the right lineups to play against them. And I'm interested to see, I guess, how Kenny adjust from last game. And like you mentioned, there were a couple of injuries last game that didn't really allow him to have, the full range of the players that he would want to use in different rotations. But I wonder if they go a little bit more small ball because of some of the issues that we see with the bigs, just to see if maybe that type of matchup works better against them. Because I think now is the time to try those different things, right? You have a couple matchups with them throughout the season, so it's like, okay, let's throw a different look at them that we didn't do last time, and see if maybe that works out better.
Yeah, I think maybe more Evan Mobley, especially offensively. Like there's something there. He gets like 22 every time he goes against Boston, which is hilarious. Like if he ends up being a Boston killer and like Bill Simmons of all people was like the
Yes.
main guy pushing the Mobley button like that.
Oh yeah.
I would love to see what that heel turn looks like for Bill Simmons because like he is
Oh
so on the Mobley club. And then
yeah.
like if it ends up being something that hurts him. But right now it's in a comfortable place where Evan's getting 22, but they're not really a threat to Boston. Um,
Right.
Darius had a rough outing last time
He
versus
did.
the Celtics. And like it started to become a thing where it's like, oh, people think that Darius can't show up in these big games. I always find that like a weird thing because I'm like, I get that Darius has had a couple of like awful performances nationally, but
Yeah.
Darius has also had some standout performances in some national TV games. Like I think
Yeah.
people are acting like it doesn't exist, and I'm like, I think he's played a lot better than people give him credit. It's just when he plays
Yeah.
bad, it turns into this entire thing. How important is it for Darius Garland to get it going against the Celtics?
I mean, you're totally right, first of all, that it just feeds the narrative almost that if he has one bad game against like the Celtics or the Knicks or like one of the teams that are competitors in the East, it just kind of feeds, I feel like, what people already believe about him.
Mm-hmm.
Even if when you actually look at the statistics kind of laid out, like, he doesn't completely crumble every time against those type of teams. And look, I think part of the issue last time for him was I think he was tired. And I mentioned that earlier on how the team was kind of exhausted from trying to keep that streak up. So I think there's a good chance he plays a lot better this time than he did last time. But I think in general, we've seen this year when Darius Garland is playing his best, this team does really well. So I think it will be important for them to, have him coming out and playing well. But yeah, it is just funny how those narratives kind of once they get hold with the fan base or just like NBA commentary in general, it's hard to break it, even if like everything we're seeing in front of us is telling us otherwise. Like he's had an incredible year so far. There's nothing to tell us that, he just because he had one off game that he can't show up in the big moments. And mind you, it was a big game, but it's a regular season game in November. Like this isn't
Yeah.
like a, game 7 in the playoffs that he's crumbling in. So it's just it's funny how those things take hold.
Well, it's interesting too, like what people will qualify as something that like fits into that genre. Because like he had 27 versus the Golden State Warriors. Was that not a big game?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that
yeah, it was a huge game. It was the biggest game on the Cavs schedule. Up at that was as big as a game as Boston was, right?
yeah.
And like we're just gonna act like that didn't exist. But if he has a big game against Boston, or if he has a big game in a play-in, I bet people are gonna be like, "Well, it's not the playoffs," but it didn't have to be the playoffs to confirm the narrative. It just feels like confirmation bias with Darius. Like
Yes.
every time he messes up and he hasn't provided a ton of evidence for people who have been doubting him, everybody just goes, "See, look, that's what I mean." But it's
Yeah.
not really consistent with what happened. I'm like, he had scored like 20 points 6 straight times, and now it's just straight. He's not good anymore because he
Yeah.
didn't get it the one time. It feels like Twitter, right? Like that
Yes.
feels like a Twitter brain argument where it's like, oh, it's
Yeah.
just so reactionary to whatever happened.
Yeah. Well, and this team is also 17-1, and I feel like that gets lost in some of the conversation. Like we could be critical of certain things and oh, they could have done X, Y, and Z better, but like, come on, like it doesn't get better. The only thing better than 17-1 is 18-0. So like we're okay. He's gonna be fine. But I think you're right. It's an online thing where I feel like people feel like they have to be mad about something. So
You
there's
slid
that.
your Ohio State education in there with that line there. I noticed that. The only thing better
Yeah,
than
yeah,
17.
It's so ingrained in me. I didn't even know I was doing it.
So
That Urban Meyer coming out.
yeah, look, a Urban Meyer disciple right there in the flesh.
Yeah. Oh God. I don't know if
But
that's the thing I would want to be called in life, but well, I guess we'll take it.
yeah, just put that on your resume next time you're sending it
Yeah.
out. Urban Meyer disciple. But
Perfect.
I think also for this Cavs team, like we know Donovan Mitchell. I think there was a question of it last year in the playoffs if he's going to show up. I think he's erased all question of that now, like
Yeah.
with how he played in the playoffs last year. Um, like Jarrett Allen is somebody I find interesting because like he has bounced back so smoothly from the slander that came amongst his name. And it
Oh my
wasn't
God.
just like after the Knicks series. It was the whole season. People were mad at Jarrett Allen. And like he's just handled it in such a wholesome Jarrett Allen
Yes.
way. And he's coming out and he's playing like the thing that was hilarious about it, people were so mad at Jarrett Allen last year. He played at an all-star level.
Yeah.
Like similar to what he did.
Yeah.
One, do you think Jarrett can make the All-Star game this year? And two, given the issues with the two big lineups that we mentioned earlier, but Jarrett Allen's such a good player. Like, do you think it's worth it to just try to have him work out the kinks with figuring out how to exist there in some of these
Yeah.
spreads while also letting Evan cook?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your first question, like I think if he continues at the rate that he's been playing, he absolutely can make the All-Star team. I mean, you think back to that was 3 years ago now when Darius and Jarrett made it, or was that 2 years ago? I have like no
I
sense of time
believe
anymore.
Darius and Jarrett made it before Mitchell was on the team.
Yeah,
That was the
right
year
before. So that
before.
was three then. Okay. Um, I feel like he's made so many improvements from the player that he was then. And obviously he got in at that point in time for a number of reasons, injuries, it was in Cleveland. I feel like that kind of added to, okay, we're gonna, maybe have him take one of those spots. But for everything that we've seen from him as a player, he has improved in so many ways that I think, if he continues at the level he's playing, he should or he could be able to make that all-star team. To your second question about kind of working out the kinks, like I feel like I can see both ways where Kenny might want to try some other lineups that he think might work better against the Celtics and maybe, give some of, and he could do both. He could try out some different lineups and also say, hey, we want to put Jarrett and Evan out there together and just kind of make them work together and figure out, how to have some better flow in the game with the two of them when you're playing against the Celtics. So it might be a little bit of both, but whenever I think of where we are at in the season, as much pressure as we have put on this team because of how good they have been playing, it is November, almost December basketball, and it is the time to work out those things if you want to do that. So if Kenny wants to go that route, I think this is the game to do it in.
Definitely, definitely. Who is the player you're most excited to see do more down the
Mm,
stretch on this Cavs team? So I think there's a lot of guys you could look at.
a lot of guys is who is all going to be back? Do we, I guess we don't know for sure, like by then, because it'll be, a few more days from now, but are most guys supposed to be back for this matchup?
I think Karras has a chance. I don't think we'll see
Okay.
Max Strus.
Okay. Right. Um, I asked about Karras because I feel like historically Karras has done well against the Celtics. He really shows up and shows out in those matchups. So I think that could be a huge difference maker if they're able to have him out there on the court. I also think just as we've continued to see Ty Jerome grow as a player, like I want to keep seeing more of him in these big games and giving him minutes in those moments. He doesn't have a ton of experience in intense games like that so far. So I think it would be important for him to have some time down the stretch too and see what he can do, especially if he's continuing to have these like 26, 29 point games, like ridiculous numbers he's been putting up in the last, week or so. So those two I would say for sure.
Definitely, definitely there. Um, when you watch Jalen Tyson, like what do you see like his upside being for this team?
Mm. So that's a good question. I It's hard for me to, like, find a role for some of these, like, end of the bench players right now when so
Yeah.
much of the top part of our bench is doing so well. Like, I really can't, at this point in time, like, envision throughout the season justifying giving him, like, any sort of real minutes until we get, like, I'm sure more injuries that will happen or, the season kind of ebbs and flows. So, I feel like that's gonna, I don't know, evolve for me over time, which is a very, I feel like scapegoat answer, but it is right now. There's so many other more important players, I feel like, on that bench where I don't really like have a role for him in mind this season. I would say, in the future, as I think the bench probably starts to evolve, they might not be able to, continue to bring everyone they want to back. There might be more of a place for him.
I am interested to see like what Kenny Atkinson does when he gets everybody, or if he gets everybody back healthy, what these rotations are going to start to look like, because he has some choices to make, right? Sam Merrill has
Yeah.
played some good basketball, but like, is he going to really play when you got Ty Jerome and Max Strus
Yeah.
holding down the same exact spot? Like, what do you, George Niang has kind of like solidified this spot as like the pseudo kind of backup big, right? Like they kind
Yeah.
of go to him as a four in a lot of lineups, which makes a lot of sense with George. I mean, that's why I thought he played when he was with the 76ers. So, okay, you're going to go that direction. Like Dean Wade, when he comes back, he's one of the few wings that you have on this roster. Same thing with Karras,
Yeah.
right? Like, how does Karras fit in with Max Strus? Are you going to have Strus as the two? Like, what are you going to do with Karras? Do you want Karras out there
Yeah.
with Ty? Are you going to run really big at point? And put Ty there, and then also have what Dot, like what do these lineups look like? Because there's a lot there that you can get, but there's a lot you can
Yeah.
mess up too.
I feel like the Strus factor is something that is going to concern me when he returns. I've like wondered even if maybe they like try to trade him at some point this season because I just feel like what they have had going so far has been so seamless that I do worry that inserting him in and he would be someone that demands a significant number of minutes. I just worry about what that is going to look like. So that'll be interesting to see. You almost like don't want to mess with something so good from where it is right now. It's like, don't touch it.
Yeah, yeah. I remember having that similar feeling right before all the injuries happened with the first run of this Cavs team, right? Where
Hmm.
they were really like going, and then they made a couple of moves here, and it made sense that they had to do. I think that's what brought Karras onto the team,
Yep. Oh, I
because like
remember that day. That was a great
they
day.
yeah, they ran out of literally anybody to pass or to dribble and
Yeah.
shoot, right? Like that just wasn't something that
Yeah.
they had on the team. It's so fun watching this team now because it's like, man, I remember when it was just like, if Darius is hurt, Karras is our only guy, and maybe
Yeah.
Jetty. And now you look at this
Yeah.
team, and like you could bring Craig Porter Jr. off the bench. Last time they played
Yeah.
Boston, right? Craig had a big third quarter. Like you could bring
He
Craig
did.
Porter Jr. off the bench, like Ty Jerome is getting 20 points every once in a while. You got Karis LeVert still. You can look at Evan, who's starting to create some kind of like perimeter penetration game. And then Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland. Like this team went from a team so void of perimeter scorers to
Oh,
now it's one of their strengths, and almost like a strength to a fault because sometimes they rely on the perimeter scoring too much.
yeah. It's pretty crazy because even as recent as this off season, I was like, how are they not going to get another shooter and, free agency, anything, just like making some type of move? Because after last year, it just felt like the guys that we had brought in to fulfill those roles weren't just weren't being that for us. But it's amazing what happens when even just like one like Ty Jerome being who he is, or like getting a couple good minutes from Craig Porter, just having a few guys just be slightly better and having, one to two more options, it changes everything and it feels like a completely different team almost sometimes.
Yeah, it does. It does. And it's just the magic of having, one guy contribute. I think Ty Jerome's a lot to it, right? Even when he was just scoring 10
Yeah.
points, right? Before he started popping off for 30. Like he was
Yeah.
super effective and helpful for this team. And I thought he gave Karis LeVert a bit of a boost.
Hmm.
Other than obviously winning, a final question I'll ask you is, what are you looking for in this Celtics game to kind of be that marker of progress outside of just the result itself?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, the one that we haven't really touched on is like defensively what this team does against the Celtics. Obviously, we mentioned they were shooting out of their minds last game, so you don't expect that to repeat. But, at the same time, like we allowed them to play as well as they did and shoot as well as they did in that game. So I think that will be a big factor is defensively how we do. I also think sometimes you'll see that third quarter lull with this team where they kind of take a little nosedive in the third quarter, pick up the energy back then in the fourth quarter. So, playing that consistent basketball throughout the game, keeping the energy up, especially when you have a team that can turn it on as much as this Boston team can turn it on. I think that, that'll be a big deal too.
Absolutely. Ab, let them know where they can find you, get more of your Cleveland sports content. I've heard you had a YouTube channel, so make sure to plug
Yeah.
that here.
Yeah. So my podcast, Just a Girl from Cleveland, I have a YouTube channel. Quincy so graciously tagged it in there last time. So I saw a few of you come over there, which was great. And you can find also on Apple or Spotify if you want to listen there. Both me and Quincy doing stuff with the OBR, so you can check out some video work I'm doing there as well. And Blue Sky, follow me on Blue Sky, please. We're trying to rally the troops and get them on Blue Sky. So check it out there.
Every day I'm like, do I want everybody there? Like, because it's like,
I
it's kind
know.
of like the cast where I'm like, yeah, well, you got a good mix. Like, I'm having a good time. Like,
Yeah.
because when
No,
everybody
it's so
start getting
peaceful.
there, yeah, when everybody start getting there, then it starts to change. And it's like, okay, well,
That's
now
so true.
everybody's here, right? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
it kind of happened with basketball in the summertime, right? Where it's like we was having a good
100%.
time, we was enjoying it, and then everybody came, and it's like, oh, we doing this now. All right, we
Yeah.
doing Caitlin Clark legacy arguments. All right, like
Yeah.
I
It's
guess the
funny if
fun's
you
over.
if
Like,
you like toggle between Twitter and Blue Sky and just quickly go back and forth, it's like these are two different groups of people now. So yeah, spending a lot more time on Blue Sky, but maybe you're right. Maybe only come over there if you're going to be normal. That's my that's my request.
I mean, you could come on there and be abnormal. I will just block you. Like it is what
Yeah,
it is.
not
So
dealing with
like,
that.
yeah, if you find your group of unnormal people, like, yeah, do what you want. Just like don't bug me, you know?
Yeah.
But appreciate your ad for being on. Make sure you guys check her out. Peace.